Hello and welcome to this 10-minute tip. A 10-minute tip is when I spend 10 minutes or less coaching you on one aspect of the 4-H program. This video is going to be about 4-H club and volunteer satisfaction surveys. Now, this is part of a series that we've been doing over a few weeks about measuring the impact of our 4-H clubs. And so this all falls underneath our Initiative 7 Priority Work Group 2. And so we've already talked about doing the club visit, the power of the club visit, and using the Positive Youth Development Observation Checklist to get some observational data. We've also talked about volunteer interviews, not just when you are screening a volunteer, but then also those end of the year volunteer interviews are really important. It can help guide the direction of your volunteer training programs and support programs, but also let you know who's going to be continuing as a volunteer for the next year and who you might have some spots that you need to recruit for. It can also give you some great qualitative data about the impact of your overall volunteer management program. So I've shared examples of how to do that, when to do that, and then also how to report that data. But for this video, we want to talk specifically about satisfaction surveys for your clubs. So there are two types that we currently have. One is for youth, that you would administer directly to the youth. The other is for your volunteers. Now, you don't have to do both of them every year. You might do them every other year. I always think it's a really good idea to interview both the volunteers and the youth. That way you can triangulate the data, see if what the volunteers are saying are happening in your clubs is really happening. If it is then youth are going to say something very similar. And so that just makes your outcomes and your impacts even stronger when you're able to triangulate the data. So to find these resources, there is a print version available in Teams. So you'll go to the i7 team and then go to the channel 1.5 and click on evaluation resources. Then you go to folder 3 and then the 4-H club survey. And so these two instruments, they measure contribution, communication, and belonging that is happening in your 4-H club. So contribution is one of the 5 C's of positive youth development. Communication is one of our priority life skills here in Florida, and then a sense of belonging is one of the essential elements of positive youth development. So the other elements cannot happen if a sense of belonging is not happening first. It's also part of the 4-H Thrive model. So all of these things are really important. And so I will put links to the previous videos on the other topics as well as links to these questionnaires so that you can have easy access to them. But I've also put the navigation up on the screen. Now, you're probably wondering, well, when is the best time to collect the data? You can send out links, but probably will not get a good response rate. I have had the most success collecting data during the end of the year club celebration. You don't want to collect the data at the beginning of the year because volunteers and youth need time to implement these best practices before you measure them. That's the treatment, so to speak. So if your clubs do individual club celebrations, that'd be a great time to make a club visit and maybe do some observation, but also have youth and volunteers fill out the questionnaire. If you have a countywide awards celebration at the end of the 4-H year or right before the new 4-H year, that's also a great time to collect this information. You could have the instruments sitting out, maybe even offer a small incentive. I used to, when they would turn in their completed survey, I'd give them a ticket and then we'd have door prize drawings for different 4-H swag items. That was really popular. But just remember, you do need to have parental consent for youth to take the survey. And if you don't have parental consent, there's always a few that don't want to take the survey. Have some sort of other alternate pen and paper activity. It could be a coloring page, a word cross puzzle, something like that. A lot of you do those things on your placemats for your award ceremonies, so that would have you covered there. So think about planning to collect the data at your end of the club year celebration, whatever that might look like. Then reporting the data. So this is just one example as you analyze the data, and I've got some resources to help you do that. But as a result of the county volunteer program, volunteers reporting adopting the following youth development best practices in their club. So then you would put the number of volunteers that offered opportunities for youth to contribute to their club and community, the number of volunteers who offered opportunities for youth to learn and practice communication skills, and the number of volunteers who offered opportunities for youth to experience a sense of belonging. And hopefully what volunteers report will match what the youth report. And so then you would want to report on the youth data. So youth participating in 4-H clubs reported that volunteers provided 4-H experiences in alignment with youth development best practices. So then again, you'd report the number of youth who said that they had opportunities to contribute to their club and their community, the number of youth who had opportunities to learn and practice communication skills, and the number of youth who reported they had opportunities to feel like they belonged. And another question on the survey is the youth get to respond as to whether or not they feel like the 4-H program is a good fit for them. And so you can report the number of youth who said yes, that it is a good program for them. So last but not least, let's just go over where some of these resources are. They are all in the I-7 team, channel 1.5 under evaluation resources. So there is the youth club questionnaire, the volunteer club questionnaire, and then there's also a really helpful spreadsheet called workload indicators. And this is helpful because if you use these tools at the end of the year, after you've turned in your report of accomplishment, you have to log in and upload all of your workload indicators. And so if you use these instruments, you will have data to report on for workload indicator 84, 85, and 86. So you'll have some great data for your workload indicators. So that's always a good thing, right? Because if you're like me, sometimes I'm like, oh, I didn't really plan ahead like I should have to be able to match my data up with those specific workload indicators. So if you plan now, you'll just be crushing it when it's time for reporting. A couple of other resources that you might find helpful. There's a data analysis worksheet to kind of help you figure out how you're going to analyze your data. There's also a really great fact sheet from, I think, Wisconsin Extension on how to analyze quantitative data, which most of the survey or the questionnaire is quantitative. But then there are some open-ended questions, and that's where the last resource might be helpful, where it gives you tips on analyzing qualitative data. So if you go back to these examples of reporting, I think it would be really cool after you talk about youth reporting that they feel 4-H is a good organization for them to belong, maybe to include a quote from one of the youth, because after that question is an open-ended question where they can provide examples of that. And so that would be the perfect place to add some qualitative data along with that quantitative data. So that is a wrap on club satisfaction surveys for youth and volunteers. I hope this has been helpful for you and that maybe you feel inspired to collect some data so that when it's time for reporting, you have good data to report and you don't sit there and go, oh no, I forgot to collect any data to report on. So here are some tools that you can just grab and go. And if you need help analyzing your data, feel free to reach out. See you next time.